It's The Real News. I'm Aaron Mate. The 2014 Maidan Revolution in Ukraine set off a bloody civil war that continues today. But the impact has gone far beyond Ukraine's borders. The ouster of President Viktor Yanukovych has escalated tensions between the U.S. and Russia. Just last month, the U.S. imposed new sanctions on Russia, in part over its actions in Ukraine. And now there is news of a Pentagon plan to send advanced weapons to Ukraine in their fight against Russian-backed forces in the east. As the conflict unfolds, a new documentary is challenging the conventional understanding of how it began. The film, produced by Oliver Stone, is called Ukraine on Fire.
More clashes in Ukraine's capital, Kiev.
What we saw here today was a revolution.
I'm an outsider to this situation, but I would like to jump into the action.
In recent days, Kiev has turned into a full-scale war zone.
События, которые проходили в тот период. Сначала акции проходили мирно. Замечены нами радикалы, которые относились к правым партиям, неофашистским организациям.
В том, чтобы посеять хаос.
Создавалось такое впечатление, что в посольстве Соединенных Штатов существует штаб, который управляет этим процессом.
Who was your highest level of contact with the U.S. government in this period?
Байденом, вице-президентом. Но дело в том, что господин Байден говорил одно, а в Украине делали другое.
Questions of credibility are being raised after a private chat between two top U.S. diplomats was leaked online.
So you had this remarkable phone call where you have these two senior officials of the U.S. government apparently talking about a coup or how they were planning to restructure the government of Ukraine.
Сценарий захвата власти и государственного переворота.
We saw in the 1980s, the Central Intelligence Agency had been largely discredited because of scandals that had been exposed in the 1970s. They still want to get rid of certain governments. They wanted regime change in Syria, for instance, regime change in Iran. And they have a lot of allies now inside the news media, inside the government, and that means that they can do a lot to control the narrative, and it works with the American people.
NATO has expanded into 13 countries.
Почему мы так остро реагируем на расширение НАТО? Когда страна становится членом НАТО, ей уже очень трудно сопротивляться давлению со стороны такой крупной страны, лидера НАТО, как США. И там легко может появиться все, что угодно. Система противоракетной обороны, и новые базы, и, если потребуется, и новые ударные комплексы. А нам что делать?
The United States is imposing new sanctions in key sectors of the Russian economy.
After the third wave of sanctions hit Russia, the tensions between the two countries skyrocketed. So the question presents itself: are we truly witnessing the beginning of Cold War 2.0?
That's a clip from the trailer for Ukraine on Fire, produced by Oliver Stone. And I'm joined now by the film's director, Igor Lopatonok. Igor, welcome.
Hi, Adam.
Let's just do a brief summary of what the Ukraine crisis is all about, just to remind people. So in 2013, you have these protests break out against the president, Yanukovych, ostensibly over the fact that he neglected a trade deal with the European Union in favor of one that was offered by Russia. There was also anger over corruption allegations against his administration. And these protests culminate in February 2014 in Yanukovych being overthrown. There's a very famous intercepted phone call as this crisis is exploding between the U.S. ambassador at the time, Jeffrey Pyatt, and the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Victoria Nuland. And so Yanukovych is facing all these protests, and Nuland and the ambassador have this conversation.
Questions of credibility are being raised after a private chat between two top U.S. diplomats was leaked online.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
Sullivan's come back to me VFR saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
Okay.
Biden's willing.
So that's a phone call between Victoria Nuland, at the time the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, and the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piet, and they're talking about Arseny Yatsenyuk, who they call Yats, and lo and behold, he became the leader of Ukraine after Yanukovych was deposed not long after this phone call. So Igor, talk about what is going on here.
That's a very advanced operative who dispatched in Ukraine to organize the coup, to organize the regime changing, talking to his supervisor. That's very, very, I think that's a Russian Secret Service who intercept that call, and they make it available public, showing the light how United States official just plotting the result of coup d'etat in a country.
So you have interviews where Oliver Stone, who executive produced the movie, he interviews Yanukovych and also Putin. And when he talks to Yanukovych, Yanukovych tells him that his point man in the U.S., who he was talking to, was Biden. And he suggests very strongly that Biden was basically playing a double game with him. He was telling him one thing, but doing another.
First of all, Biden's son was involved in a business in Ukraine. He held the position in a board of company what's named Burmisa. Now that company accumulate up to 30% of all oil and gas exploitation in Ukraine. So Biden have an interest. And when Victoria Nuland delivered this speech about $5 billion what the State Department of the United States spent on the promoting of democracy in Ukraine for that years, she talking on the background of Chevron logo, when the Chevron they try to make the shale oil pumping in Donetsk area. So that's follow the money rule working all the time. So Ukraine, as usual, was not only political battlefield, but also some place when oil and gas involved. And don't forget about pipeline from Russia to Europe was going through Ukraine, was giving them the very big leverage against Russia. So that's the big and complex situation, but that situation happened and situation violently blew up, and there's no way, no military solution for that war. And there's a legit civil war going on in Ukraine, and 10,000 people already killed. And there is no way, and the only Minsk agreement when they try to prevent the Ukrainians from attacking that rebellion, because you cannot say there's a 3 million terrorists living in my country. This is your people who live in Donetsk. You cannot blame them for be terrorists because it's like women, older men, the kids.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Igor, so you're speaking to the division that exists inside Ukraine, and I think that this is part of the problem with Western media coverage, and it's something that you point out inside your film, which is that in terms of the grievances of people inside Ukraine, attention, at least in the West, has mostly been paid on those who the U.S. is officially allied with, the parts of Western Ukraine, like Kiev, the more nationalist parts of Ukraine that don't want Russian involvement, that don't want to speak the Russian language. Whereas you're saying there's a whole bunch of people who are being ignored who actually want ties with Russia and who speak Russian as their as a dominant language. But it's those voices who have been silenced. So if you can comment on that, and also talk about then who is the opposition that the U.S. supported, who came to power, and your film suggests that there are, far-right Nazi elements inside this wing.
So first of all, of course, that's not Nazi who come to power, but in Germany just before Hitler, during the Weimar Republic, that also was Nazi. They look at the Nazi and that stormtroops as brutal force. So they're using the brutal force until they understand the brutal force grow up so big, so you cannot control them. So exactly same situation happened in Ukraine. All that three leaders from Maidan, the Vitaly Klitschko, famous boxer, Yatsenyuk, who was a prime minister of Ukraine one day, and the famous guy from neo-Nazi party Svoboda, Taknibok, they was on the stage. They was hungry for power. They was hungry for the ability to exploitate my fellow country to make some money on that. And they was very, very against idea just to go for election and to be elected. Because if everybody saying that Yanukovych was bloody tyrann, dictator, blah, 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 do not forget people on a democratic election, an election was accepted everywhere in the United States as well. They vote for that Yanukovych. They elect him as a president and they put him in the power. That was the people of Ukraine. So idea was to go to the power different way, because they know with that a lot of people who support the Russian influence and who friends of Russia, they will never elect them to be a president. That was a problem. And that's happened. They go very, very violent way. Before that, Ukraine already experienced a color revolution in 2004. 10 years ago, before Maidan event. And it was kind of peaceful, but that was also technology, what was used and produced a result. And after the election, they start blaming election in a fraud, asking for the third tour, and against, in violation of Constitution of Ukraine, the Yushchenko proceed to be a president of Ukraine. What's happened after? Economy collapse. People totally was disappointed by his presidency, and the next election he take 3% of electoral votes. So that's what's happened 10 years ago before the Maidan event. What we experiencing right now, the economy in collapse, in a free fall, the debt of country grow 300%, and the GDP per capita diminish and 180%, and the exchange rate 300%. So basically all that revolution, so-named revolution, and joining the European Union trade agreement, was a huge mess and huge disaster for Ukrainian people. That's why we experiencing now exodus of people from Ukraine. They live in the country. They don't want to stay anymore. They want to find a better way to live for them and their families.
But on this issue of a new Cold War, I want to talk a bit more about that phone call between Nuland and Pryatt, because I hadn't heard it when I saw your movie. I had not heard it since President Trump got elected, and since the months since have been dominated by this Russiagate narrative, where Russia supposedly, determined the outcome of the election and colluded with the Trump campaign. And hearing that phone call, hearing Nuland and the ambassador talk about which Ukrainian politician they favor to lead Ukraine, who, Yats, as they say, turns out to be the one who becomes the new prime minister, I was thinking that, those investigating Russiagate and trying to find proof of Russian meddling would love to have a phone call like that of Russian officials talking about how they want Trump to lead the U.S. and how they're organizing and making moves behind the scenes to ensure that that takes place. Igor, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, I think, in our movie, we have a direct question to President Putin. Why he think he was positioned in the Western media like that, like his position now. And he had very, very interesting answer on that. He understand it. He said, for some reason, they need, Western the civilization, they need an enemy to organize some discipline, because people disorganize it. They start trading, they start talking, they start exploring different ways. So they need a perfect villain, and Iran not match that picture. But as I understand, the Putin thinks he is perfectly matched to that position, to be villainous villain Zhupel, who have the nukes, who have that strong position defending interest of Russia, and that's perfectly match that idea to organize one villain, the big and coward and meddling Russia, who behind of American policy do everything, elect Trump, invade Ukraine, and do everything bad what's possible for the international society. But reality is totally different, because you can never find any evidence, and you can only, do that conspiracy theory and build some kind of fake ideas and try to implement that ideas in the brain of poor audience, hoping, but they not critically thinking, they not can check it and double check it. So, in United States now, you can easily go to jail if you talk to Russian ambassador. But in Ukraine...
Well, Igor, no one's gone to jail yet, but somebody did get fired, Michael Flynn, yes. But quickly, as we wrap, go ahead.
And you will be under investigation for talk to Russian ambassador, especially if you're related to the... And what's the function of ambassador? This function to present the country. I quite... But in Ukraine, during the Maidan event, the Payat was staying on the street and regulating the traffic. That was kind of micromanagement what they organized. Not only choose who will be president, who will be prime minister, who will be justices in the Supreme Court.
Right, Igor, and let me say quickly, Igor, someone in your film makes a point that imagine if the Russian ambassador had gone to Ferguson during the Ferguson protests and cheered on the Ferguson protesters. What would the reaction be?
That was Yanukovych, President Yanukovych said that in our film. And yes, they even arrest Russian correspondent from RT who go to Ferguson. What you're talking about, ambassador? Ambassador banned around that event. So meddling, this is a real meddling. This is a real collusion. This is really against any international law, and the neoconservatives very skilled on that. They do it all the way. They do it in Libya. They do it in Syria. They do it everywhere in Arab Spring. They do it before. They do it in Iran. But before, CIA was like an action player. But after they understand, under the Reagan administration, what CIA exposed too much, they invent the NGO. They do the National Endowment for Democracy and other foundations. And also, not only the government players, but the private players like George Soros emerge, and they try to change the way of how people live, how they elect, just for their own purpose. And Soros is like the biggest mastermind of the regime changing in the world.
Okay, Igor, very quickly, it's hard to summarize and encapsulate a complex problem like Ukraine in an interview like this. And it's also hard to summarize the film itself. So how can people see the film?
Oh, first of all, we're already on Amazon. We on Vimeo. You can go to our website, ukraineonfire.com. You can find the links on that. And yeah, Amazon, iTunes, and Vimeo. This is our outlets, and we're selling the DVD and Blu-rays on Amazon as well.
Igor Lopatonok, the director of Ukraine on Fire. Igor, thanks very much.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.